Story 1. Wife regrets listening to empowering advice to open their marriage. I'm here to ask for advice on what I can do to save what's left of my marriage. Let me start by saying I've been married to my husband for 5 years. Together for 7. For confidentiality, I'm going to refer to us as James and Skylar. We met in our second year of community college. I got a 2-year degree in office management, and James went on to obtain a 4-year degree in business administration from a university that conducts remote classes at the community college. Fast forward to today. I'm 26, James is 27, and we were planning on starting a family later this year. Our dream was to have 4 kids, ideally 2 boys and 2 girls. We had a very happy marriage, and our 2 families loved both of us. Now here's where I effed up, Roy. I developed what some may call a work husband, but in my case, it was with a delivery driver for one of the big 3 delivery organizations who makes deliveries to our office. Let's refer to this man as Jaden for confidentiality's sake. At 25 and single, Jaden has been delivering to my office for nearly 2 years. From the moment we met, a certain chemistry was present. Not romantic necessarily, but an undeniable spark. I was drawn to him, and we'd spend at least 10 minutes talking every time he made a delivery. I looked forward to seeing him and always made sure I was upfront when it was time for his delivery. One day, our conversation went further than normal. Jaden said he had a personal question to ask me. He said it was very personal and didn't want me to be offended or to jeopardize our working relationship. I told him, "Of course not, you can ask me anything." Jaden then told me, "I feel a very strong attraction to you and wondered if you felt it too." I found his boldness surprising and somewhat embarrassing. After taking a moment to gather my thoughts, I told him the truth. I told him I definitely felt it too. Jaden confessed that he would have asked me out if I weren't married. I thanked him for the compliment, and that was the end of our conversation. He left, and that was that. For the next week, we just made brief, awkward small talk when he came in to deliver packages. I was very concerned and felt guilty that I may have crossed a line with him. I just couldn't shake this feeling. At home, James and I were enjoying married life. Let me state clearly, I've always been totally satisfied with James as a lover, friend, and husband, and believe at the time he would have said the same about me. He was perfect for me. That being said, I foolishly started dreaming about how I could selfishly have both my loving husband and some kind of relationship with Jaden beyond just our work conversations. Later, I learned that this is sometimes called being a cake eater. I started to look into it and found some articles about polyamory and open marriages. I thought these ideas were silly and gross, so I didn't think about them much at the time. I also knew that my husband wouldn't agree to such a thing. Even if he did, it could hurt our marriage and both our families might stop talking to us. That's something I didn't want to happen. Weeks went by, and my married life was going great as always, but I kept thinking about making a connection with Jaden. I started researching the subject again and came across a post online titled, "It Doesn't Hurt to Ask." It was a blog post by a woman who claimed to be in a successful open marriage. She wrote about how she loved her husband, but also wanted to be in a relationship with a man she met while doing volunteer work. The blogger wrote that she just didn't know how to approach the subject with her husband without destroying their marriage. She kept these feelings bottled up for over 2 years, and then one day when they were on a long drive, she just decided to ask him. To her surprise, he was very interested. Long story short, they opened their marriage, and they both now have partners outside the marriage that they see 3 to 4 times per month. The blogger claimed they've been doing this for 4 years now, and their marriage is stronger than ever, and they are both happier than ever. Her story caught my attention because it was exactly what I wanted but was too scared to ask my husband about. Then one Sunday morning, as we were lounging around the house, surfing the web on our phones and chatting casually, I decided to bring up the subject and asked him directly, "I just read this online post about open marriages. What's your opinion on them?" He then asked me if I was talking about couples sleeping with other people. I confirmed and asked him again what he thought about it. He said he thought it was disgusting and that people should just get divorced if they want to sleep around. I told him it's really becoming popular here in the US and in many Western countries. James' facial expression indicated he was just disgusted by the subject, so I just quickly changed the subject. Based on his reaction, I planned to never bring up the subject again, as the last thing I wanted was to jeopardize our marriage, as it was great. A couple of weeks go by, and James and I are cuddling in bed, high on love after just having a fantastic sexy time. I'm lying on his chest and can't see his face, and out of the blue, he asks, "Who did you have in mind when you brought up open marriages last week?" I was startled and got a pit in my stomach. I slowly raised my head and turned to look at him and said, "What are you talking about? What do you mean?" James then shared that he had read some research suggesting that if a woman mentions an open relationship to her partner, she has either already cheated or she has someone else lined up. His revelation startled me. Actually, it shook me to my core. James could see the effect his words had on me and said, "I know you too well. I can tell you're hiding something, so be honest." I fell silent, looked away, and then told him that I had never cheated on him and would never do so. I could have left it at that, but I didn't. I then admitted that if we ever considered an open marriage, there was a friend at work who I might consider. James asked, "Tell me about this work friend." So I began to explain about Jaden and our interactions up until then, including what Jaden had told me about his feelings but didn't disclose I had reciprocated the same feelings back to him. James's next words freaked me out. He said, "You know, technically, you've already cheated on me." I became irritated and responded defiantly, insisting that I hadn't, but he countered, "Yes, the relationship you have with this Jaden guy is what is termed an emotional affair." I had never heard of this concept before, so James explained it to me. I was getting more and more frustrated, and James suggested we stop discussing it for now, as he needed to get some sleep due to an early start the following day. He fell asleep quickly, but I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed my phone and began to research emotional affairs, reading numerous articles and posts about them. James was right. What I had with Jaden was dangerously close to being an emotional affair. No, let me correct that. It was indeed a full-blown emotional affair. I felt horrible, as though I had betrayed my husband. Unable to sleep, I got out of bed, went downstairs and made myself some tea. I eventually fell asleep on the couch around 4 a.m. At about 6:45 a.m., James woke me with a kiss, saying he was leaving for work and I needed to start my day as it was almost 7 a.m. As usual, I returned his kiss and told him I loved him. But this time I put even more emphasis on the sentiment. My mind clouded with guilt over my feelings for Jaden. Several days passed, and once again, we were lying in bed after making love when James suddenly said he'd be willing to try an open marriage if I really wanted to. This took me aback, and I asked, "Why are you bringing this up now?" He explained that he'd been thinking about our discussions and figured we should try it while we were young if it was something we desired. I expressed interest but vowed never to jeopardize our marriage or love, as he was the most important person in my life. James responded by saying, "If our bond of love is strong, it will withstand infidelity." I countered that a mutual open relationship wouldn't be considered infidelity because we would both be agreeing to it. Instead of commenting on that, he simply said, "Consider our marriage open starting right now." I was taken aback once more and urged him to slow down, saying we needed to establish ground rules. He specified that the only ground rules he wanted were 1. We needed to announce who we planned to sleep with and when in advance. 2. We had to disclose the encounter to each other afterward without going into graphic detail. And 3. Protection must be used for all forms of sexy time, no exceptions. I agreed to his stipulations and proposed adding a couple more points. 4. We would keep our open marriage confidential, and 5. We would promise each other that these extramarital relationships wouldn't destroy our marriage and we would remain together. James stated that he could not agree to either of these conditions. When I asked why, he simply said he didn't and wouldn't agree to these stipulations and did not want to discuss it further. I felt very uneasy about this, as this was totally out of character for James, but I cuddled up to him and we fell asleep. My discussions with James left me uneasy about the whole open relationship thing, like he had some ulterior motive. So for the next month, I did not pursue the open relationship and we lived our lives normally. During this time, I stayed distant from Jaden at work, only having short, basic discussions with him about the weather and how busy he was and how busy I was, superficial things like that. Then one day, Jaden told me that he really missed our conversations and asked me what was wrong. I told him that I was busy here at the office and at home and just didn't have time to talk lately. In my head, I was thinking about if I should tell him about my open marriage. There, I decided I would. How I wish I could turn back time and undo this decision. It didn't seem appropriate to have such a discussion at the office, so instead, I invited him to meet for a drink after work that day, to which he agreed. We met at a local bar that had an outdoor patio, perfect for the warm early spring weather. I told him about my recently open marriage and came right out and asked him if he'd be interested in a relationship with me. He didn't hesitate and said yes. He said he's been waiting for me to come around and hasn't pushed out of respect, but said he had been having dreams about me for months now. Most of our conversation during that meetup was flirtatious in nature. It was a Tuesday, and we agreed to meet the following day for our first romantic encounter at his apartment right after work. However, I emphasized that I'd need to leave by 6:30 p.m. to return home to my husband, who remained my utmost priority. That night, I returned home and prepared a lovely dinner for James. After dinner, I informed him about my discussion and meeting with Jaden earlier that day, and that we had scheduled a date for the following day after work at his place, provided James was still comfortable with proceeding with our open marriage. I could tell James was taken aback as he responded, "Oh yes, okay. So you're going to meet him tomorrow?" I confirmed but reassured him that we could still call it off, as my main priority was him and us. He insisted, "No, let's do this." We hugged, but I sensed stiffness and distance in his embrace, unlike our usual ones. I attributed this to nerves. We didn't talk much that evening as he was occupied with working in his office, and I had my own office tasks to complete. When we went to bed, I spooned with him and tried to initiate intimacy, but he mentioned he was too fatigued and needed to rest. The next morning when I woke up, James had already left, leaving a text explaining he had an early meeting which he had forgotten to tell me about. He added that he'd see me that night. This was unlike him, but I dismissed it and continued with my routine of getting dressed and heading to work. I chose a particularly cute outfit that day, aware that Jaden and I were going to meet right after work. Throughout the day, I texted James but received no response. I was once again considering canceling the date with Jaden. Telling you my story, I really wish I had. When at 4:17 p.m., I received a text from James. He wrote that he loved me and would see me that night. This brought a sense of relief, and I took it as a green signal from him to go ahead. I'll jump straight into it. Jaden and I met, and the sexy time was great. Not quite to the satisfaction level I have with James, and definitely no feelings of love, but very fulfilling, mostly because of the sheer lust and forbidden aspect of what we were doing. I left his place after about an hour and a half and got home just after 6:40 p.m. To my surprise, James was not home yet. I was okay with this as it gave me time to shower and put my clothes in the washing machine to remove Jaden's cologne smell. I didn't want James to be exposed to this. Though I felt fulfilled physically, I had a deep feeling of guilt, shame, and remorse, and just felt dirty. I had a real tug-of-war going on in my mind and was nervous. I decided that I would prepare a quick but great dinner for James and lit candles to create a romantic mood. I wanted to make sure that he knew how much I loved him and that the physical affair with Jaden meant absolutely nothing to me. It was just physical and was nothing even close to the love and physical fulfillment I have with him. I was hoping that we would end our night making love. I know some of you may think this is selfish and downright gross, but keep in mind I used protection for everything I did with Jaden, and nobody's stuff of any kind were exchanged. At 7:30 p.m., James still wasn't home, and I tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail, so I texted him stating I was home and at dinner waiting. I heard nothing from him. It was now 8:50 p.m. and I was getting worried. I kept calling him and leaving messages and sending texts. At around 9:30 p.m., I got a text from him stating, "Don't wait up. I'll be home late." I texted back asking where he was and who he was with, but he didn't text back. I was exhausted and fell asleep sometime after midnight. I was awoken by the sound of the shower in the spare bathroom running and got up to investigate. The door was locked, totally uncharacteristic for James, so I knocked, but he didn't answer. Then 10 minutes or so later, James emerges with a towel wrapped around him and said, "Hey, how was your night?" I told him it was fine, but then he directly asked me, Did you sex time Jaden? I asked him not to use that term but then admitted that yes, Jaden and I had been together. I then asked where he had been. He said he had spent the night at several bars and had been out dancing. I asked who he was with, as I could smell perfume on his discarded clothes. I asked, "Who is this her?" He stated that since they didn't sleep together, he didn't need to tell me who she was. I can't say the explicit words here, but I can add that he never used the F word to me, so his way of talking to me and using that word made me very worried. I then asked him why he used the guest bathroom to shower, and he told me he would be using the guest bedroom and bathroom until I took 2 STD tests. His words crushed me, and I responded, "What? This wasn't part of our rules." I made sure Jaden used protection for everything we did. He retorted, "Have you never heard of oral HPV or oral herpes? I'm not getting within 6 feet of you until you're cleared. You can consider this my version of social distancing." I was incredibly upset, crying, and told James the first wanted to close our marriage, as this was the last thing I had wanted to happen. James retorted, "No way. You had your turn, and now I'm going to have mine." Upset, I kept crying as he simply stated that he was going to bed because he had an early meeting and needed rest. I spent most of the night crying my eyes out, eventually falling asleep on the couch. By the time I awoke, James had already slipped out. He had sent me a text saying, "Don't wait up for me." I tried calling him, but he didn't pick up. I sent texts and left messages throughout the day, but he never responded. I was sick and felt like I was going insane, thinking I had likely destroyed my marriage. We didn't have any deliveries that day, so I didn't see Jaden, but I called him at 4:30 p.m. and asked if we could meet tonight. He agreed and mentioned that I sounded upset. I told him that I was, but said we'd discuss it when I got to his place. We met, and I told him I wanted to end our relationship, admitting it was a big mistake as I loved my husband and wanted only him. I explained the situation and he understood. The only thing he asked for was one more hookup, after which he'd never interact with me again other than for work purposes. I agreed, and we had a very short hookup, nothing but a straight vanilla position, which lasted less than 10 minutes. Afterward, he told me, "That was terrible. You just laid there like a tree trunk." I apologized, admitting that this whole thing was a big mistake and it wasn't his fault. I got dressed, gave him a final hug, and left. Before I left, Jaden said, "I'll never understand women like you." I asked what he meant by the comment and he simply said, "Nothing. No comment," with a look of complete disgust on his face. I quickly left, crying the entire drive home. How could I have been so stupid? I destroyed my marriage for what? For nothing at all. I thought I had to be the stupidest person in the world and again just felt dirty. James didn't come home until 1 a.m. that night. I was sick knowing that I had single-handedly ruined my life. On Friday, James did the same thing and left before I got up and sent me a text stating, "Don't wait up for me." This distance and coldness were crushing to my soul. I love spending time with my husband in the mornings, evenings, and weekends, preparing his meals, cuddling, taking walks after dinner, and just talking about stupid stuff. This was all gone, and I missed it so badly. I texted James and said I wanted to talk with him tomorrow morning, and he texted back and said okay, as long as it was first thing as he was leaving for the day. I responded back asking where he was going, but he didn't reply. He didn't get home until 1:30 a.m. I didn't say anything and just laid in bed crying. He again took a shower and just went straight to bed. I woke early to wait for James to get up. He came into the kitchen at 7 a.m. and poured some orange juice. The vibe was very cold and emotionless. He made no eye contact and just sat down at the table with me and started looking at his phone. I got up and went over and plopped down on his lap and said, "Look at me." He looked away, but I said, "Look at me," and gently grabbed his face, looking into his brown eyes. I told him that I loved him with all my heart and that I made a bad decision. Not a bad mistake, a bad decision. I told him I was sorry and would do anything to regain his trust and love. He didn't say anything and just looked at me like I was insane. I asked him if he loved me, and he said nothing. I said, "James, please answer me." He said he didn't know. I just started crying and said, "I can make this right." He told me, "I don't think you can." I then called him a bastard and said, "You planned all this. You set me up to divorce me, didn't you?" He said he didn't but did admit as soon as I brought up the concept of an open marriage. He knew our marriage was likely over based on what he had read. I then asked him why didn't he just shut me down and demanded that I end all contact with Jaden. He said, "You can't force someone to be faithful. You either are or you're not, and you obviously are not a monogamous person." I just cried and told him I was and to not throw us away. He said nothing, just got up and said he was leaving. I asked where he was going and he said he'd be back after midnight. I then reminded him that tomorrow was Easter Sunday, and we were scheduled to leave at 7 a.m. to drive to my parents' house. My family absolutely adores my husband, and we spend nearly every holiday with him, as his parents now live in Florida. He told me that he wasn't going. I was shocked and devastated and asked him to please come with me, and he just coldly said no. I asked him what I was going to tell my parents, and he said he didn't care, then said, "Just tell them the truth." I begged and pleaded with him to stay home with me, but he just got dressed, took a gym bag of clothes and left the house. I am destroyed inside and feel totally deflated. I want to ask you all here for any suggestions and steps I can take to save my marriage. I'd really like to hear from any people who have done something similar with open marriages and whether a couple can recover from such a betrayal. I'd really like to hear from people who have successfully reconciled after an open relationship. Thank you for being here listening to my story. I'm going back to bed now to cry for the rest of the day. Update 1. I wanted to give everyone an update. First, I want to thank those of you who responded with feedback and support. It really helped me get through the last couple of days. There were a lot of people who rightfully criticized me and called me nasty names, but I deserve it, and I appreciate your feedback too. Easter Sunday and today have been very difficult days for me. 2 of the worst days of my life. I drove to my parents' home, and when I arrived, the first thing they asked me was, "Where's James?" I lied and told them that he had an emergency at work and would not be able to make it. I told them this as I did not want to upset our family gathering. My family bought my story but grew suspicious as the day went on, as I was not texting or calling my husband like I normally do. To deflect their suspicion, I sent several fake texts to throw them off and acted like I received texts back from him and told everyone he was still busy at the office and would call me tomorrow. Truth is, he never called or texted me, not even to see if I arrived safely. This broke my heart. I planned to stay over at my parents' house and tell them about our marital problems on Monday. I dreaded doing so as I knew they were going to be enraged and hate me. Well, I told them this morning, and it went just as I predicted. They yelled, called me terrible names, said they didn't raise me like this, and a bunch of other things. They called my sister to join us, and she proceeded to reach out to me. I cried and told them I was sorry. I told them I knew what I've done is terrible, and that I have learned from this and will never make the mistake again in the future. I told them my sole focus for the foreseeable future is to win back the love and trust of James. In the end, though they were very upset with me, they told me they loved me and would pray that our marriage can be salvaged. I drove home Monday evening. During the day, I called and texted James, but he did not reply. When I arrived home, I found a note on the counter stating he had gone to Florida to visit his parents and would return on Sunday. I felt so bad as we planned on going to visit them sometime in early May, and now because of me that's not going to happen. I hate myself. That's all I've got to say for now. I'm just really depressed and sad. What scares me is I'm no longer crying. The hurt and remorse I feel is so deep inside me now. Tears are worthless. Update 2. It's been almost a year, and I didn't plan on posting again, but there was such an outpouring of interest from the community, I decided to. Well, I have bad news and some good news. First, the bad news. I am divorced. It was finalized back in December. In the end, James decided he couldn't remain married to me after I was with another man. He said he could never trust me again and was embarrassed to be seen in public with me. He feels divorce gave him his masculinity back. I disagree, as he never lost his masculinity, and no one knows about my brief connection with Jaden except for our families, but okay, whatever. Now for the good news. No, strike that. The great news. James and I started dating again last month. We got back together on Valentine's Day, and it's been fantastic. We only see each other whenever he wants, which has been about once a week, but our passion level is off the charts, way higher than when we first got together 7 years ago. Now, he's made it clear to me that this is only a physical thing and that we will never again be married, live together, or be a couple ever again. I'm okay with this. Well, not really, but I'll take what I can get. My goal is to win back James, and if I can't do that, I want to have his babies. Now don't get the wrong idea. I would never baby trap him. I just would like to have children with this man. I've thought out how we could share custody and make this all work without being married. I know it sounds crazy, but I love him and don't want children with anyone else. I know doing so would likely jeopardize any potential relationship I might have with another man, but I don't want anyone else but James. That's all I have to share now, and I'll probably not post again unless something major happens, but I would love to get your feedback on my situation. Do you think I'm crazy for dating James? Should I just try to move on and find another love and start a family with that person instead? P.S. Jaden is not an option and never was. He was just a bad decision I made and will never make again. Thank you. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I am the wife of a porn addict, and it destroyed me. Porn is not some innocent pastime. Porn isn't something that doesn't hurt those we love. Porn is destructive to yourself and to those that love you. I used to be confident and self-assured and had pride in myself and loved myself. Now, nearly 6 years later, I'm a shell of the person I used to be because of my husband's porn addiction. I watched year after year my husband ogles other women right in front of me, literally fantasizing about effing these women while sitting right next to me, holding my hand. I learned how time after time my husband preferred to sit in some dirty, nasty public bathroom for God only knows how long, watching God only knows what, and jerking off to the point of injury instead of coming home and making love to his willing and waiting wife. I now know that during our lovemaking, all my husband thinks about are nameless women and is effing them in his head and just using my body as a means of doing this. There's more, so much more, but it hurts too much to talk about it. I had caught him a few times. He rationalized his behavior, promised to stop, and told me he had for years. Now I found out it's never stopped. Not once. He's been lying to me for years, and now finally when he's literally destroyed the person who loved him more than life itself, he's ready to change. Why did his recovery have to come at my expense? Why did his willingness to finally get help and admit to what he's been doing to me all these years have to happen when I've reached rock bottom? And now I'm supposed to continue to support him, to make it easier for him so he doesn't relapse, be kind and sweet and not talk about it with him so that he can continue to succeed while I watch him take quick peeks at bikini girls on TV or quick glances at young girls in tight yoga pants at the store. I'm supposed to make it easier for him when I no longer want to live, when I don't sleep, when I hurt myself to take away the inner pain my husband's addiction has caused me. So for those of you who think this is harmless, you are dead wrong. If you think that by hiding it makes it okay, you are wrong. I would never have married him had I known he had any addiction, drugs, alcohol, gambling, or sex. I had the right to know about it. I had the right to know what I was marrying into, to make that decision for myself if I could accept it. But that choice was taken away from me. For the sake of your loved ones, be honest from the beginning. Don't take away their right to decide, because for me at this point, it's a matter of my own life or death if I stay. Final update. I am the wife of a porn addict, and it destroyed me. It's been just over 2 years since I first learned of my husband's addiction. It's hard to read my initial post. Man, was I in a deep, dark hole. That hole only grew too, and I saw some pretty dark times in the months to come. For those who offered kind words and sympathy, offered advice and reached out, thank you. For those of you who did the opposite, all I can say is I hope and I pray that you never have to experience what I have the last 2 years. Over the last 2 years, I've been dealing with many disclosures and admissions, each one worse than the last. What I thought was a pornography and masturbation addiction turned out to be far worse. I can say this has been the most humbling experience, and I've learned that unless you're in someone's place, you really have no idea of what you would do, regardless of what you think you would do. It's also been humiliating, degrading, tormenting, and isolating in ways that are unimaginable. Some will say I'm weak for staying as long as I have, but they are wrong. It takes great strength to wake up every day and face the same demons, and determination and grit to slay them every single day. Some days I wanted to die, other days I wanted to run, yet every day I chose to keep fighting until I no longer felt like dying or running. For those of you who are struggling with this addiction, if there is anything I hope to gain out of all we've been through, all I have endured, it is this: pornography is a drug, and a powerful one at that. It lures you in with the promise of pleasure and excitement. And when it is done with you, then what? You are alone, sitting in a dark room with nothing but the lights of a computer screen as a companion. Alone, standing in a bathroom with your phone in your hand as your lover. Alone, laid back on your sofa staring at a frozen television screen after your video has ended. Alone. Then the shame comes. The shame of once again giving in to this temptation. The shame that you couldn't stop yourself yet again. The shame of your secret and that you chose fantasy over your partner. The one person who's there every day to support you, to love you, to live a life with. Yet you seek sexual release behind their back, knowing they deserve better, knowing this is wrong. But it doesn't end there. No, pornography is not done with you yet. Erectile dysfunction, viewing pornography that is progressively hardcore or material you never dreamed you would view, or worst case scenario, illegal pornography. And I promise you it will happen. Like any drug, you build a tolerance. Then when fantasy isn't enough, you physically start acting out: cheating, public masturbation, stalking, window peeping. The list goes on. Will porn be there to keep you warm at night? Will porn wrap its comforting arms around you when you are grieving a loss? Will porn give you a family to fill your home with warm memories? Will porn build a life with you? Or would you rather look back and think about all the times you masturbated while your wife slept? Or how you'd rather miss your kid's school concert so you can have time alone to get off? You are the one missing out. This isn't a life. You are at the mercy of pornography, and the price you pay is far more than you realize. You aren't just hurting yourself. You're hurting those you say you love. I can promise you, your partner isn't going to be angry. They're going to be hurt that you would rather turn to fantasy than to them. And they deserve better. You deserve better. For anyone who's interested in knowing, I'm alive and well, although if I were honest, I didn't know if I would be. My husband's addiction had many layers, has many layers, and everything that was safe to me had been violated in one way or another, and I no longer had safety. I had nowhere to go, and no one to talk to, because if anyone knew what my life was, I would be ostracized. My kids would have been ostracized. I had far more to lose than just a marriage. After feeling about as low as anyone could, I decided to have cosmetic surgery for myself, and I feel amazing about myself again. I also went back to school to get my master's degree with a plan to specialize in sexual addictions. I'm 1.5 years in with 1.5 years left, all A's thus far. Maybe I'll open my own practice, maybe I'll move. Who knows? What I do know is that I'm not limited. Do I still have days that are rough? Absolutely. But I fight every damn day. I fight back. I love myself. I love who I have become, and I've had to pay dearly for the person I am today. My last disclosure was 5 months ago when I learned my husband was using his job to get entrance into women's homes and use their personal items for his pleasure. My advice to anyone: get cameras installed. He also went window peeping on the night of my birthday 6 months ago. The next month, my husband entered treatment. Am I still married? Yes, but with very strong boundaries. I made him disclose his actions to his employer. He is no longer allowed to work alone, period. I have a tracking app so that I can make sure he's not frequenting public places to act out. He has an app that monitors his screen activity so that he cannot access pornography. He does not use credit cards so that he cannot purchase anything without me knowing. These were the conditions I made clear to him if we were to stay married, or he could leave at any time. He chose to stay. After inpatient treatment 1,000 miles away and $25,000 later, he recognizes now how ill he was, and he will always be an addict, and he never wants to go back to that place again. He is willing to do what he knows he needs to do to stop that from happening. He has little self-control, and he has told me and his therapist that I have saved his life, and he is forever grateful that even with the boundaries, I stood by him and I fought for something far greater than just our marriage. Are the boundaries too much? Maybe. But he's welcome to leave any time. I am not concerned with protecting the addict. but I will protect him, myself, and society to the best of my abilities. To conclude this post, I would like to say that pornography is not what you think it is. Many of these people in pornography are victims of sex trafficking, childhood sexual abuse, and prostitution, and are forced into this life with drugs, manipulation, abuse, fear tactics, and many others. It is a business that supports the continuation of all of these things, and I encourage you to please check out the Fight the New Drug site, link below. If you are not part of the solution to combat this, then you are part of the problem, and as long as you support pornography, you are supporting the continuation of abuse of thousands of children, women, and men. Good luck to you all, and I wish you the best in this powerful struggle. Now on to the next story. Story 3. I'm smack dab in the middle of having 2 siblings, and we all grew up in this quiet little town. It's the kind of place where everyone knows each other, which can be nice but also a bit too much at times. My dad's the kind of guy who's always working, like really hard, but he's not the type to talk about his feelings or anything like that. And now he's thinking about hanging up his boots and retiring. My mom, on the other hand, is the complete opposite. She's always been the homemaker, sticking strictly to the old traditional values she grew up with. They're both from a conservative and religious background. I love them. They're my parents after all, but I've always felt like I never quite lived up to their expectations. They seem to see me as the family letdown, which stings a bit. Then there's my older brother. He's literally the golden boy of the family. At 40, he settled down and married a woman who is pretty but doesn't really express much of herself. She's super quiet and doesn't seem to have much to say. They have 2 sons who are all about sports, specifically the kind where you might end up with a bruise or 2. Honestly, they can be pretty over the top and a handful, definitely not the calm, quiet types. My brother sells cars for a living at a local dealership. It's what he's chosen to do as an adult, and he seems to think it's his job to guide me too. But the way he treats me feels more like he sees me as someone who can't manage on his own, like I'm someone who needs constant help and should be super thankful for any attention he gives. He often dishes out advice, but it feels more like he's just rubbing in how great he thinks his life is. He likes to brag about his big house, his fancy cars, and his wife who looks like a trophy. He goes on about his sporty kids, his powerboat, his ATVs, pretty much painting a picture of this perfect life. It makes me feel even more like the odd one out. Growing up, I was the kid who was too emotional, too quick to tears, and always making excuses for why things didn't go right for me. The school was a real struggle. I didn't fit in with the tough sporty crowd. I wasn't one of those big strong guys who thrived on physical games and roughhousing. Instead, I was the target of jokes and wasn't really included in things, which just added to feeling like I didn't belong. I totally get it, like a lot of other kids in my town, I have asthma. But here's the kicker. My parents don't really believe asthma is a legitimate health issue. On top of that, I've been dealing with depression for as long as I can remember, and physically, I was never the kind of kid who could sprint down a field or throw a football straight. This didn't help with my parents' constant comparisons. They'd often point out how I wasn't as smart or as outgoing as my older brother. It was tough, and I ended up finishing high school with a pretty average 2.5 GPA. I managed to save up some money and started college, but things didn't pan out and I dropped out in my second year. This decision became a frequent topic of conversation, and not in a good way. Then there's my younger sister. She was pretty much the family's princess, and I can't say much about her since I moved out when she hit her teenage years. Most of what I feel about her comes from seeing her as an adult. She's not a bad person by any means, just a bit pampered. She tends to mimic the way my parents and brother treat me, probably because it's easier than being the target herself. She got married super young at 19, had a huge fancy wedding, and now has 3 kids. Out of her kids, the one I connect with the most is her middle child. I guess I see a bit of myself in her because she's also the middle child and she gets picked on a lot. It feels like I understand her struggles more, probably because they remind me of my own. After I left college, I really leaned into my introverted, nerdy side. I found a job at a local gaming and comic book store, a place I loved, but sadly it closed down over 7 years ago. Despite that, my parents still talk about it like I work there today. But working there wasn't all for nothing because I met another geek who had big plans. Together, we started a tech support business that really took off. After a while, my business partner decided to sell our company to a larger corporation. As part of the deal, I was bought out with a mix of cash and stock options, and those stocks ended up doing really well. With some smart moves, I invested and even started a few more businesses on the side, many of which turned out to be quite profitable. I don't like to brag about it too much, but I've managed to build up assets worth over $1 million now. I'm the CTO of a new private startup. Despite my financial success, I live pretty simply. I drive an old Saturn that's been around for 15 years. I live in a modest 2-bedroom house in a nice area, and all my furniture is secondhand. I'm still single. I regularly see a therapist and I stay pretty busy. One of my ongoing challenges is battling alcoholism, which is tough because just like with my asthma and depression, my parents don't really believe it's real. They think it's all in my head. So while my life has had its ups and downs, I've managed to carve out a path for myself that works, even if it's not what everyone else might expect or understand. My parents have this expectation that I should be at their place for dinner every Sunday. But it's not just a quick trip. They live on the other end of the state, so we're talking about a 90 to 120-minute drive each way that pretty much eats up half of my weekend. Despite this, they seem to think that being single and what my brother likes to label as a mental case, I wouldn't have anything better to do with my time. These dinners can be a real trial. I sit there for 3 hours listening to forced compliments about my brother's latest big sale at the car dealership, or getting unsolicited advice on how I should grow up, get married, and be a proper adult. If I ever miss one of these dinners, it's guaranteed to be the main topic of conversation at the next one. Although they've never outright called me a moocher, the implication hangs in the air, which is both confusing and frustrating. Honestly, I often find myself questioning why I keep going to these dinners. When I talk to my therapist, any success I've achieved is either minimized or twisted into something negative by my family. Until very recently, everyone back home still thought I was working at the now-closed gaming store. My past retail job was always looked down on compared to my brother's supposedly more adult, outgoing, and successful career. This contrast made it tough to share the true state of my life and successes with anyone from back home. In my family, games and comics were always brushed off as childish hobbies. Whenever I tried to bring up technology, a field I'm actually an expert in, my brother would talk over me as if I didn't know a thing. I usually just let him ramble on. It was clear to me that he was spouting nonsense, but I was hesitant to call him out. I didn't want to have to explain my expertise, which would inevitably lead to explaining more about what I do. Deep down, I think I was scared that they wouldn't take my career seriously, and it might change how they saw everything about me. It's fair to say I've been a bit of a mess. However, everything changed last month. Somehow, my brother got his hands on some of my personal information. He actually hired a private investigator to run what he claimed was an employer background check on me. I suspect he and my parents were planning some kind of intervention. What they discovered completely blindsided them. They found out about my actual net worth, that I wasn't living in some rundown place, and other personal details I'd kept private, especially because my work involves security. I even got alerts about some unauthorized attempts to pull my credit report. After putting 2 and 2 together, I figured out what had happened. This revelation has forced everything into the open, and now I have to navigate this unexpected shift in how my family views me. It's a lot to process, especially considering the underestimation and misunderstandings that have been part of my relationship with them for so long. I was so furious about the breach of my privacy that I ended up hiring the same private investigator agency to dig into my family's finances. It turns out my brother was living far beyond his means. The investigation revealed several past arrests for DWI and public drunkenness, along with domestic disturbance calls and a file with Child Protective Services. Although no current charges were active, he was also struggling with scheduled IRS back payments and was juggling 3 mortgage loans on his house. His credit was a disaster. In contrast, my parents lived modestly with very little to their names beyond what I already knew practical and quite sensible financially. I didn't even bother to check up on my sister. When I showed up at the next family dinner, I was ready to confront them, potentially burning some bridges. However, the atmosphere I walked into was unexpectedly different. My parents began treating me with a kind of awkward reverence as if I had suddenly become the golden child. This shift made my brother visibly agitated. Halfway through dinner, he lost his composure. In an attempt to regain some ground, he started boasting about recent sales commissions and a supposed promotion. I simply acknowledged these achievements, subtly reminding him of his IRS troubles, the loans, and his stretched credit situation, essentially acknowledging the good while highlighting the reality of his financial mess. The whole situation was strangely depressing. The sudden change in my parents' behavior towards me felt insincere and forced, turning what was already a tense family dynamic into something even more uncomfortable. He denied everything initially, but when I handed him a copy of the report, I pointed out that he was the one who inadvertently recommended the agency by using it to investigate me. I must admit, there was a brief moment where that felt satisfying. My parents reacted with dramatic surprise, scolding him, but it was clear they were in on it too. They had to have provided my social security number for him to get the report. The whole scene was profoundly unsettling. There was no pleasure in the revelation or the ensuing argument. It crystallized my disdain for my family, highlighting their greed and cowardice. Over the next hour, as accusations flew, they started throwing each other under the bus while I tried to stay as quiet as possible. Occasionally they turned their frustration towards me, and I responded with nonchalant one-word answers or just shrugged. Meanwhile, my sister, her husband, my brother's wife, and all 5 kids sat there dumbfounded, witnessing a family unraveling like never before. Usually, our gatherings are mundane and predictable. My mother would start the conversation. My father would interject with grunts. My brother and his wife would boast about their lives, and my sister would share updates whenever she could. This breakdown was unlike anything our family dinners had ever seen, leaving everyone at the table in shocked silence, grappling with the sudden exposure of deep-seated issues that had long been simmering beneath the surface of our familial relations. The family dinner was tumultuous, to say the least. Alongside the usual subtle jabs about how I should look up to my brother and be a real man, the conversation spiraled into a loud, heated debate among my mom, dad, and brother. They dredged up every piece of old family drama, stuff from 20-30 years ago, arguing over whose fault everything was. It was like watching everything unravel in real time, a total free-for-all. Every negative feeling I had harbored about my family seemed to be validated in those moments. You might think I'd feel some sense of triumph or justice, but honestly, I just felt terrible. I realized I might not have handled the situation well. I knew they weren't great people, but what did I really hope to gain by exposing my brother's misdeeds? Now his kids were aware of his past, which wasn't something I had intended to happen. The evening came to a head when my brother, red-faced with fury, lashed out at me. He blamed me for all the family's problems, culminating in the harsh words, "You should have never been born." That moment was shocking, not just because of his words, but because I saw my parents trying to quiet him down, a panic move I had never witnessed before. Despite their attempts to intervene, they never really acknowledged their own role in how they had treated me over the years. It was a stark, painful reminder of the deep issues in our family dynamics, leaving me with a mix of vindication and profound sadness. When I couldn't take it anymore, I stood up and announced that I was done with these dinners and wouldn't be coming back. That's when my parents threw another accusation my way. They claimed I was withholding help from a niece or nephew who had some ailment, suggesting that I could have fixed it but chose to ignore it. This was news to me. I had never been made aware of any such issue, nor had anyone reached out to me for help. I suspect they might have been making it up right there on the spot, but I didn't challenge it. Instead, I reminded them, "I thought you believed I still worked at a comic book store." That place hadn't been in business since 2011. A fact I'd mentioned more than once, but they never seemed to grasp. The way they had rewritten our family history was not only appalling but downright embarrassing. Overwhelmed and frustrated, I just walked out and drove home. Now I'm left with mixed feelings. On one hand, I feel violated that they know about my financial worth, which I'm sure will lead to pressure to pay them back, especially since I've seen them do the same with my brother. On the other hand, I do acknowledge and appreciate that my parents provided for my basic needs, food, water, and shelter during my upbringing. It's a complex tangle of gratitude, resentment, and newfound boundaries that I'll need to navigate carefully, especially as they now have expectations linked to my financial success. This dynamic shift is something I'll likely be unpacking for some time, possibly with the help of my therapist. It's clear that setting firm boundaries will be crucial moving forward. Honestly, I wasn't really the favorite kid in my family. Growing up was tough in that way. Even though my parents never hit me, they didn't do much to stop my brother when he was mean to me. He used to punch, kick, and say really hurtful things to me, and my parents just ignored it, pretending it wasn't happening. They don't even believe that being mean with words, that's what I mean by verbal, is an actual bad thing, but it really hurts. After dealing with this for so long, I've reached a point where I just can't do it anymore. I still know they're my family, but I feel like I need to step away from them for good. I don't wish them anything bad. I just think it's better for me to not be around them anymore and start a new chapter on my own. Now, looking ahead, I wonder what will happen if I meet someone special, like a girlfriend, and we decide to get married and have kids. How will I handle things with my family then? It's something I'm trying to figure out because it could get pretty complicated. How do I introduce my new family to my old family if I'm not really talking to them anymore? That's a big question on my mind now. For the comment before reading the update, go no contact. The only reason they wanted you around before was so they could belittle you to make themselves feel good, and the only reason they want you around now is to get some of your money. Your family is no reflection of you. Frankly, they all suck. You are not a loser. You actually sound like a pretty neat person who got the wrong end of the deal when it came to family. Block their numbers and go live your life without them. I think you did an outstanding job. Lower your contact with your family as much as you like. You know they are only after your money, so you don't have to have anything to do with them on anything but your own terms. Keep talking to your therapist to help you move into a life without them dragging you down. Go no contact absolutely. If you can, pack your things and move to a new city for a fresh start. Regarding dating, lots of people are estranged from their families. It can be weird to explain to a potential partner, especially if their familial ties are strong, but you certainly are not the first person who has had to take drastic steps like this. You will build a new family when the time is right. In the meantime, there are a couple of things I think you should do if you haven't already. 1. Put a security freeze on your credit accounts. If your brother used resources from the car dealership to pull this info on you, you may want to consider telling them. I don't think they would be pleased to hear they were complicit in fraud. 2. Also, get a lawyer. You are young, but catastrophes happen, and currently your parents are next of kin by default and will inherit everything. Maybe you don't care about that, but if you would prefer to see your assets go to someone else, get it in writing as soon as possible. 3. Lastly, find a good counselor. You may experience some grief in the coming months, and it will be helpful to talk through it with a professional. Update. Man, after that epic showdown at dinner, driving back home felt like escaping a battlefield. The road was quiet, just me and my thoughts buzzing through the night. By the time I pulled into my driveway, I knew something had to change. I couldn't keep doing these family dinners, not without losing my sanity. Over the next few weeks, I kept to myself, focusing on work and my own peace of mind. The comic books and tech gadgets around my house weren't just distractions. They were my sanctuary. I ramped up my therapy sessions too, hashing out ways to keep my family at arm's length without cutting them out completely. My therapist, Dr. Bennett, was a lifesaver, talking me through strategies for setting boundaries that felt more like building a fort than putting up a wall. As the weather warmed up, my mind started wandering to the future, particularly about relationships. I'd been single for a while, focusing on myself, but the idea of meeting someone special started to feel not just possible, but likely. And then, just like something out of a comic book, Eva walked into my life. We met at a tech conference. She was giving a talk on cybersecurity, and I was hooked, not just by the topic but by her charisma. She was brilliant and grounded, and she got me. She also had this way of seeing family that was all about love, but with boundaries like steel. As things with Eva got serious, the elephant in the room was how to introduce her to my family circus. We spent many nights talking over pizza about how to handle it. We agreed on a game plan. Keep family meetups light, public, and short. Eva was on board to back me up, which was a game changer. We started with coffee meetups. I reintroduced myself to the family gatherings, this time with Eva. Predictably, the first couple of times were awkward as heck. My parents were overly polite, tiptoeing around me as if I might bolt at any second, and my brother, well, he looked like he wanted to say a million things but couldn't get the words out. My sister and her kids, though, were a breath of fresh air. Her middle kid, who reminded me so much of myself, took an instant liking to Eva. These coffee dates became our thing. They were like short expeditions into family land, quick in, quick out. It let me reconnect without drowning in the drama, and surprisingly, it started to work. My family slowly got used to this new setup. They began to respect my boundaries, maybe realizing that this was the only way to keep me in their lives. As Eva and I grew closer, I started thinking more about the long term. What would our future look like? I could see us building something solid, a family built on respect and love, not obligation and guilt. But I knew the road wouldn't be all smooth sailing. One summer evening, as Eva and I were walking by the lake, talking about maybe moving in together, I realized how far I'd come. From feeling like the family let down to standing on my own, with someone who truly got me. It was like night and day. Looking ahead, I'm cautiously optimistic. I know there will be bumps down the road, heck, maybe some potholes the size of craters. But with Eva, I feel ready for it. Setting those boundaries with my family wasn't just about protecting myself. It was about making room for new relationships, for a future where I could be happy. And as for those Sunday dinners, well, they're still on the calendar, but now they're on my terms. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't. When I do, I bring Eva, and together we handle whatever comes our way. It's not perfect, but it's a whole lot better. It's about finding that balance, you know? Keeping the peace without losing myself in the process. Story 2. Hey everyone, I'm pretty new to sharing my stuff online, so go easy on me. I want to tell you about what's happening in my life because it's a lot to handle right now. Let's start with the main people involved. There's me, my soon-to-be ex-wife Daisy, our daughter Peach, and our son Mario. We're right in the middle of a tough separation that's quickly turning into a pretty brutal divorce. So here's the story. Daisy and I are going our separate ways, mainly because she realized earlier this year that she's bisexual. She came out and told me she wanted us to have an open marriage. I wasn't comfortable with that idea at all. The situation got even more complicated when I found out that Daisy had slept with my work partner, who also happens to be one of my closest friends. I'm a cop, so you can imagine how awkward and painful that was. Felt like a double betrayal, both at home and at work. After that, we just couldn't stay together, and I ended up taking some time off to get my head straight. Initially, Daisy tried hard to keep us together. She pleaded and argued that we could make it work. But when it became clear that I was firm on not opening up our marriage, things took a nasty turn. Daisy's attitude changed completely. She started to act out of spite, and things got really ugly. She began using our kids as pawns in this whole mess, which is the last thing I wanted. Daisy started telling Peach that the reason she had to leave our home was that I didn't love them anymore, that I was breaking up our family because I hated them. It was heartbreaking to hear, especially knowing how confused and sad it must make Peach feel. Right now, Daisy is living at her mom's house, and our kids visit her there. During these visits, Daisy and her new partner try to make everything seem like a big fun vacation. They shower Peach and Mario with gifts and treats, probably trying to turn them against me by playing the cool parents. Besides all the emotional drama, Daisy is fighting me on every single practical issue too. We're clashing over everything, how much money one should support the other with, who should get what from our belongings, and the hardest part, how we're going to split our time with Peach and Mario. She disagrees with every agreement we try to set up, and it feels like she's just doing it to make things as hard as possible. Recently, Daisy, who's going to be my ex-wife, has been making things a bit complicated. She's been telling our kids things that make me seem like the bad guy, which isn't fair at all. For example, Peach and Mario started asking me if I don't like Daisy's new friend, let's call them AP, or why it seems like AP loves them more than I do. This kind of talk really messes with their heads. A couple of weeks ago, I was working on something big at my job. I'm a cop, and I was trying to get promoted to homicide detective, which requires a lot of extra hours. So Daisy and I agreed that the kids would stay with her during this busy time, and I'd visit on the weekends. When it was time for them to go to Daisy, I packed up a big bag for Mario. As I handed him the bag, he looked at me with tears in his eyes and asked, "Are you sending us away because you hate us like Mommy says?" That moment was heart-wrenching. I hugged him tight and reassured him that I loved him very much and it wasn't true. Despite my efforts, things were still awkward when I went to see them last weekend. When I visited, it was really tough. They barely spoke to me. It seemed like they didn't even want to see me, which hurt a lot. I had to wait until today to get another chance to talk with them. When I picked them up, both of them looked really sad. I managed to have a chat with them, and it was clear that Peach especially is having a hard time. She still loves me, but it feels like Daisy is making it hard for her to show it. It's a tricky situation, and I'm trying to figure out the best way to handle it so that it doesn't hurt the kids too much. It's tough when things get twisted like this in a family. She feels like she's not allowed to love me, and it's really hurting her. I can't let my princess go through this anymore. They are being actively hurt by this divorce, and now I'm questioning it. Should I continue with the divorce? Is there a way to proceed and spare my kids? Should I suck it up and stay? Now for the comment. You need to tell all of this to your divorce attorney immediately. This is parental alienation, and a judge will almost certainly order a stop to it, but that order will be hard to enforce, so you need to jump on this ASAP and then stay on it. Daisy is a very bad person. Document everything and definitely divorce her. Things will not get better if you stay. They will get worse. Dude, this is parental alienation and a big reason why my friend got custody of his kid because his ex-wife was doing this crap. Document and get your attorney on this pronto. Also, therapy for the kiddos. Your ex is a horrible human. Do not let her have your kids anymore. Tell your lawyer what she's doing and let him know that your kids are not seeing their mother without supervision. I would also call CPS and let them know what your ex is doing to your kids. This is abuse. And for the love of your kids, do not get back with her. Now on to the next story. Story 4. My girlfriend lied to me and slept with someone else. Despite facing overwhelming evidence, she continues to insist she didn't. We've been together for 2 years, but due to work, we've had to live far apart. To clarify, I was okay with her seeing other people as she was with me, as long as we were honest with each other and prioritized each other. We hadn't seen each other for 9 months until this week. The week has been disappointing. She's barely spent time with me. I had a suspicion she was spending her free time with another person from work, Brent, so I confronted her about it. She said we couldn't hang out this past weekend because she was going out of town to see her mom for her birthday. Another friend told me that was a lie because they saw my girlfriend the morning she was supposed to be away. I tried to get my girlfriend to admit this. I wanted her to be truthful so bad, but she insisted for 2 hours that she was visiting her mom the whole time. It was only after I pointed out inconsistencies in her story that she finally admitted she didn't spend the weekend with her mom. She spent 1 day there, and the next day she actually got dinner with Brent. But that's it. I told her I don't trust her anymore and I'm ending things. She begged for me to stay, saying she's sorry and that she'll work on being truthful with me, etc. I agreed, but I still felt the story was incomplete. I needed the whole truth or I would walk away. I asked if she stayed the night with him after dinner, and she said no. I asked her to show me her location history. She refused, saying that's a boundary she won't cross for herself. Her ex in the past went through her phone and beat her for it. This is the first I'm hearing of this, but I believe it. I backed down and said fine, I believe you anyway. But she continued to insist for 2 hours that she was at her mom's, and she's on thin ice. As fate would have it, the next day I hung out with another friend, Jenny, who casually revealed my girlfriend did, in fact, spend the night with Brent and that she may be more into Brent than she is letting on, as if I was already supposed to know all this. I asked Jenny how she knew my girlfriend spent the night, and she showed me a text conversation she had with my girlfriend where my girlfriend said she woke up with a migraine and Brent gave her medicine, implying she spent the night and worked from his place. I took a picture of the conversation. Later, I confronted her. I gave her one more chance to tell the truth. I'm nearly begging for it. She insists her story is complete and they just got dinner. So I show her the conversation, and she says this, "Well, I'm destroyed. I get what this looks like, but I promise I didn't spend the night there. I lied to Jenny because I didn't want her to think I'm free. I didn't want to hang out with her. She then went on to criticize me for getting that picture through sketchy means. I did not. I tell her the burden of proof is now on her to prove she spent the night elsewhere. This should be a slam dunk case if she was telling the truth, right? A phone call to her roommate, her location history, anything. But she couldn't produce anything and continued to insist I believe her. I got a clever idea. I told her to call Brent on speakerphone for me to hear and to ask what was the name of the medicine he gave her that morning. If he says a medicine, my girlfriend is lying, and she spent the night there. If he's confused, she's telling the truth. Now, I've been trying to stick to just the facts this entire post, but please allow me to get emotional for just a moment here. Yes, the Reddit way would have been to simply show her the screenshot and walk away, but I stuck around because I wanted her to convince me she was telling the truth. I gave her so many outs. The universe is playing a practical joke on us, surely, and the proof of the truth is somewhere. We just need to find it together. I talked to her for hours trying to find it, but the further she went on, the further I felt I was diving into the darkest parts of the soul of someone I loved. By asking her to make this phone call, I touched the bedrock of the cold, infinite abyss of an unmapped, knotted cavern I would have once called my soulmate. After I asked her to make that call, she looked lost for around 30 seconds, just a dead gaze. Then her face went into battle mode, and this was her reply, word for word. I can see how hurt you are. How seriously I messed up and broke you. It hurts my soul to see you like this. But what the heck? How could you ask me to do that? Are you hearing yourself? Me. I need you to prove to me you haven't been lying to me for the past 3 hours. Her now crying, I didn't. And if you cannot believe my words, that's it. I can't. I love you. I love you so much. I've been waiting for 2 years, and I would do everything for you, and it's ruined because of this stupid thing. It's not fair. You choose to make me feel like a cheater, like I'm a despicable liar, like I've shown you nothing but love for 2 years. This is bad luck. Maybe this is the universe saying we shouldn't be together. You decided to go through those messages, so that's it. If I keep doing this, it's going to stain everything, and I'm going to resent you. I'm begging and screaming for you to believe me, and I just can't anymore. Me. Did you spend the night there or not? Her. I'm telling the truth. Because the universe has a sense of humor. At this point, Brent calls and she rejects the call. I said goodbye and left the room. Was I right to walk? I get that there's really no pre-agreed upon expectation that I'd be given her weekend when I visit her, and I truly believe I've made it clear I would have been okay with it if I was just given honesty along the way. I am sure I created a safe space for her to tell the truth to me, so why lie? It's a fascinating hill to die on. I can't imagine why, despite facing overwhelming evidence, she continues to double down and insult me. Does she actually believe her lies? Does she have an image of herself in her head, and confronting the truth of her actions destroys that image? Was I right to walk away? Please, someone help me make sense of this. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.